Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to continue our look at A1, the amazing anthology from the late 80s and early 90s. We're up to number 2 here. This came out in 1989, and once again, this is a star-studded issue. First of all, we start off with this amazing Mr. X cover by Dave McKean, and usually I would prefer when Dave McKean draws as opposed to when he just does all this photo collage stuff. But this is so brilliant. This is so great. I don't know if he made this thing or if this is some found object. Like, is this part of a car? I don't know. But either way, it really captures Mr. X. It's pretty impressive. All this like kind of architectural stuff behind him. Because if you've read Mr. X, he's an architect. Just really nice. This one's 128 pages, really fat, this one. And it's got a flip cover, so we'll get to that when we get to it. We got the contents page. And the credits of behind the scenes credits. I like how the indicia, they always they make kind of fun. This one is like a children's story. Once upon a time, there was a splendid book called A1. And it goes on like that. We have the editorial by Dave Elliott, half of the editorial team. And we start off with this great story, Big Death, by Peter Milligan and art by David Lloyd. This is just a really just sad story. Pretty much, it's very realistic. But it does take place in this world, almost like that movie, Children of Men, I believe it was called. There's no babies have been born in like 15 years. So everyone is basically, this is the last generation. Nothing will live on after everyone who is alive has died. So of course, obviously, it's, people in this world are pretty depressed. They're, a very sense of doom. This main character, for some reason, he's married to this woman, but he keeps visiting his ex-wife. And it appears that maybe they broke up because their child was hit by a car and they couldn't handle it together. But it seems like they love each other, and he loves going to visit her, and they have great memories about their times together. And so it's just basically just like a little, a short story, nothing fantastical about it. Just this character's thoughts and him talking about his current wife, him talking about Jane, his ex-wife. This one panel here is drawn by Siobhan Dodds. I think I recognize that name. I think she's a letterer in English comics. I could be wrong, though. I know I've seen that name before somewhere. And once again, he's hanging out with Jane. And they part. She drops him off. He says, Peter Milligan writes, "One day this will be the last thing I see of her. One day this will never have existed. Because there'll be no one around to remember anything. It'll just be the end of all humanity." Unfortunately, this issue, they have ads. Which I'm not thrilled with. This next story is called King Pant, written by Philip Bond and drawn by Jamie Hewlett. Though I could be wrong about that. Maybe they just shared duties. But yeah, you know what? To be honest, this looks way more like Philip Bond art than Jamie Hewlett. Those guys are so interchangeable to me. It's hard to tell. So who knows? I guess I could have looked that up. Sorry. This is just a funny little story about this crazy dork who's the biggest fan of this band called Pant. I think he's like one of their few fans. And he's at the dinner table. His sister's making fun of him. And I guess Pant is going to a concert, a Pant concert. He calls himself King Pant. He's like the king of the groupies. And of course, nobody likes him. He's just this total dork, and everyone mocks him. And when he tries to get their autograph, I'm sorry, first he tries to stage dive so he can get closer to the band. He tries to get up on stage, and one of the musicians just kicks him off the stage. He lands flat in his face. People just step on his head. So afterwards, he waits backstage to get their autographs, and they're all just like bugger off, face ache. And he gets in a scooter and chases after him. He's like, I'm gonna get the autograph. And I like how we see his autograph book. I guess it flies. It flies into the sky. And Tom Baker is one of them, the 70s Doctor Who. And I guess his pen that he was going to use to have them sign autographs flies out of his hand, you know, and it hits their tire and pops the tire. They skid off the road and the van explodes. So he kills his favorite band, Pant or No More. But after he's recovered, he is looking for another band to be in. He actually deludes himself into thinking he's in the band when he likes a band. And, of course, he picks U2. I like this next time, King Simply Red. Because he's no longer King Pant. So this next one's really interesting. Mr. X Windows. And it's pretty much just this jam comic. It's not really much of a comic. It's a bunch of sketches. Where they got all these various artists to show what's going on in all the windows in Somnopolis. Mr. X, the great 80s comic, it took place in Somnopolis, a city where everyone was going insane. Something about the architecture, or the psychotecture, if you will. Mr. X was this architect. He wanted to use architecture to change moods, to maybe even heal people with mental illness, but they screwed up his plans. They cut corners. So his dream city did the exact nightmare opposite. It became a city of nightmares. And in every panel in that comic, people are jumping out of windows. It's just a common thing. So they asked all these artists to say, okay, if you're in Somnopolis, you're peeking at someone's window, what do you see? We start off here with the Charles Vess full pager. And always nice to see him. And then look at this guy. Some of the best artists in comics. There's some great stuff. We got Dave Gibbons. We got John Higgins. This one is just perplexing. John Higgins, probably his biggest claim to fame is coloring The Watchmen. Of course, Mike Mignola. This is before Hellboy and stuff. Mike Mignola wasn't the mega name he is now. And then Mark Farmer, the English, usually inker. We have Paul Grist, the great English cartoonist behind Kane and Jack Staff. I wouldn't even guess that was him. And look at this, Simon Bisley, Matt Wagner, Jamie Hewlett. Man, I really love Jamie Hewlett's style. I don't have that many Jamie Hewlett comics because a lot of the stuff he did, like Tank Girl, I just thought they were kind of dopey. The stories didn't really appeal to me. I've got all of her early appearances in Deadline, that magazine from England, and they're fun, but I love the cartooning, but not enough to go out and buy all the collections and stuff. Paul Chadwick of Concrete fame, Ted McKeever, Brian Talbot of Luther Arkwright fame. These are all really nice illustrations. Nick Abadzis, the English cartoonist. And then we have Brian Bolland. Beautiful pencil sketch from Brian Bolland. That's all he does. He doesn't know how to draw anything that's not amazing. And then we have Philip Bond. We have Mark Badger doing a very almost abstract one. And look at this Kevin O'Neill one. That is Kevin O'Neill being Kevin O'Neill. It's crazy. I'm not even sure what I'm looking at here. Oh, look at this beautiful Mike Kaluta one-pager. That's some great stuff. David Lloyd, pretty obvious. Bob Burden. Bob Burden doesn't even try to fit the whole thing of this. He just has a flaming carrot sketch. I love this one, which was very surprising. It looks like Kaluta to me, very much like Kaluta. It's Will Simpson. I know him mainly from, he did a long run on Hellblazer when Garth Ennis was writing. Great stories by Garth Ennis, by the way. But I hated his art. I did not like Will Simpson. He put in all the lines and stuff, but it just wasn't it wasn't good drawing at the foundation. It was all sketchy and had tons of shading lines, but all the faces looked dumb and bad. And here's Brett Ewins. You may remember him from the Strange Days video we did about a year ago. And then we have the little credits of who did what. But we also have a beautiful Paul Rivich drawing. Pretty much the creator of Mr. X. Or the co-creator with Dean Motter. Oh man, that's good stuff. I'm pretty sure though Paul Rivich came up with the whole look of Mr. X, you know, a bald guy with glasses. And that's pretty much what Mr. X was. He was just this cool icon. Of course, they had the great first 4 issues by the Hernandez brothers. After that, pretty much nobody cared. But he still looked pretty cool. Another ad. Now we have another Bojeffries saga chapter. And this one is called Sex with Ginda Bojeffries. And Ginda is just this monstrous, bestial woman. She's part of the Bojeffries family. And she's just totally improper and clueless and just brutal person. She goes up to this woman she doesn't even know. And she says, hey, you're coming to the discotheque with me tonight. I'm on the hunt for some man meat. And she says, I need, this magazine says, I'll stand more of a chance if I take an ugly friend along. And the woman goes, but I'm not ugly. And so Ginda just punches her in the face and makes her ugly. She even tars and feathers at her boot. So they're at the bar, the discotheque, the bar, and even though she's tarred and feathered, this other woman's getting hit on more than Ginda. So Ginda goes up to some guy, basically shanghais him. She gets him blackout drunk, takes him back to her apartment. And it's almost sad, though. She doesn't really even know what sex is. And she just has no clue. She just knows she wants to do it. So even though she's such a terrible monster, you almost feel sorry for her at the end. Like she's pretty lonely. I mean, she deserves to be. She's a horrible person. I wouldn't want to hang out with her either. But at the end, she basically says, okay, we're going to practice that safe sex. You indulge in your most perverted desires as long as I'm in a different room. That'll make it safe. And I'll do the same. So she's just sitting in this room yelling down like, talking dirty. And the guy's just like, I think I'm going to go now. And she thinks that's his pillow talk. She's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go too. And then he runs away and she's like, where are you going? But she doesn't seem too unfazed. This is kind of odd. It's called This Really Happened by Bambos, who I guess he did comics for Marvel UK's Real Ghostbusters comic. Not very good. And this is just a true life anecdote he has. Not that interesting either. Kind of weird that this snuck into A1, because everyone else in here is pretty top-notch. A Death on the Beach by Phil Elliott, the great mini comic artist from England. And so this is takes place in 1949. And I guess this church was razed to the ground. And there's an inquest. There was no sign of any natural phenomenon. Arson was doubtful. And I guess charred trees were found some distance from the church, and gravestones had been felled. Out at sea, late-night fishermen saw blazing lights in the sky. So we see this guy who's basically the narrator of the tale. He lives in this nice house, and he finds this, like, spaceman. He drags him home, and he says, "I'm dead, but I can still talk telepathically with you." And he gives him all of this technology that is beyond Earth's technology. Luckily, this guy's an architect, so he can draw the things that he's describing. He's talking about his home planet, and the guy is drawing them for him. And remember, this is 1949, and this spaceman gives him blueprints, basically, for like a VCR, recording television onto reel-to-reel tape. Increase efficiency in vacuum cleaners. Nothing that fancy. So basically, this guy becomes a handyman with the help of the spaceman. He's just really good at fixing things. And so basically, we find out it was this guy's spaceship. It crash landed, and that's why the church burned down and those gravestones were toppled, because, it took a while to stop the spaceship. And then one day the voice stopped. The spaceman stopped communicating with him. And it just kind of ends that way, where this guy basically saying, "I've got plenty to keep me occupied. I've got all of these blueprints to develop and technologies to enact." So here we have a laser eraser and press button story in prose form. These guys were in Warrior magazine, written by Pedro Henry, and the art in this accompanying this story is by Glenn Fabry. Of course, beautiful art by Glenn Fabry. The guy's got chops. And I'm not going to talk about this too much because it's not a comic book. But if you've ever read Laser Eraser and Press Button, it's a very typical story. It's told from Laser Eraser's point of view. So kind of interesting that the narrator is just this, like, kind of lunkhead. He's basically just hell-bent on destruction, this guy. He's almost like Lobo, Oh, I should say Lobo's like him. He's like one of those characters that's just, like, pretty one-note, Laser Eraser's definitely more complex. So now we have part 2 of that Morelli 9 serial by Dom Reagan. And man, look at some of the panels this guy does. Look at the graphic design on this, how great that is. And then this crazy face here. He's really pulls some great shit out of his ass sometimes, this guy. I just like his cartooning style all around, but some of the panels are just amazing. He's most famous for Dom Zombie, which ran in lots of anthologies. I think it was in Deadline for a while. I think I already said that last time. I forget. I do so many of these videos. But once again, this guy, he's a kind of a assassin clone. And he wants to get his sperm. I guess he's unable to have children of his own and he wants to. And the place that grew him, since he's a clone, apparently they have some of it. So he's going to break in to this place called Fort Roar and steal his own sperm. So it's pretty much just a fun, action-packed story of him going up to this Fort Roar, which is on the Earth's surface. Everyone lives under the Earth's surface in this universe, in this world, because the earth has been poisoned. Climbs up, scales the fortress walls, breaks in. He's got to fight some guards. Just fun, cartoony, man. I love this guy's stuff. But you know what? I've read a bunch of those I remember reading those Zombie comics. They looked great, and this looks great, but he's just not that great a writer. I think that's the only reason why he didn't become a big name. I think everyone liked his art. His art is very likable, but his stories just don't really go anywhere. And I guess he succeeds. He gets his sperm, and he blows up Fort Roar. And then he's back at his apartment chatting with his girlfriend. Last issue, there was an Astro Boy painting on the wall. This one too. And I never realized it's because his hair is like Astro Boy. He even calls this a gravity pack. He calls it the Tezuka Grav Pack. So definitely this guy is giving shout outs to the god of comics. This next story is called Elephant's Graveyard by Raymond Ward, writer. Never heard of this guy. And pencils by Dougie Braithwaite. And inks by Rex Ward. So like Dougie Braithwaite stuff, it always looks pretty competent. I mean, he's definitely, from that Neil Adams school, from that lineage. Just lots of detail. Pretty realistically drawn. And this is a really not a good story. Maybe that's why I never heard of Raymond Ward before. It's pretty much just like an ecological screed. We see the scientist, and he's yelling at these other guys about how, I guess in the future, we've killed off almost all the animals. There's no more whales, there's no more birds, anything. The earth is pretty poisoned. And so I guess this guy is so sad about it. He's kind of a tree hugger, that he goes out into the surface without his containment suit. And all the other people, communicating with her, like, stop, Jeff, no. And he just has this little smile on his face. He's going to kill himself. That's all the story is. It's pretty bad. But it looks nice, Dougie Braithwaite, very professional. And I think they have this story in here, because look, here's an ad for Greenpeace, which I'm pretty sure they just donated to Greenpeace. I should have looked this up. Maybe the information's out there, but it has art. Maybe this is by Dougie Braithwaite. I don't know. But these are pretty nice drawings. But it's an ad. Oh, this story is pretty interesting. Mainly because it's... So this is written by Graham Marks. If you remember that name, you might remember that name from all the Epic Illustrateds we looked at. He wrote a lot of the stories that John Bolton drew in Epic Illustrated. I've never seen him anywhere else. I just know of him as John Bolton's writing partner. And art by John Bolton. But look at John Bolton. He's drawing like Van Gogh. I've never seen him draw like this. I don't think anyone has, because he hasn't. Look at this. It's some good stuff. And basically, it's Van Gogh. And it sounds like he's having a mild psychotic episode. He's fixating on this chair. He's like, this chair reminds me of another chair. And he starts thinking of Whitechapel and Mary Jane Kelly. He says, I can't go back there again. I can't, mustn't ever. And we see Mary Jane Kelly, the Whitechapel prostitute. And basically, in his interior monologue, he's talking about how he would find these prostitutes when he was visiting London and tell them to change their ways. And they would just laugh at him, of course. And so the implication is that he's Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was Vincent van Gogh. And then there's a little postscript. In the winter of 1888, Vincent van Gogh arrived in the south of France to paint. By May of the next year, he was in a mental asylum, and before another summer, he was out, and he killed himself. Very interesting theory. I wonder what Alan Moore thinks of this. Okay, I think now we flip the book. So now we have a cover by John Bolton, illustrating Michael Gilbert's Mr. Monster character. Very pulpy. And kind of weird to see John Bolton drawing Mr. Monster. Kind of an odd couple. Contents page. And we start off with a Mr. Monster comic. This is called, give me a second. It's called, oh, it doesn't say here. It said on the GCD. Oh, it's called The Absolutely Positively Coolest Mr. Monster Story Ever. And as you can see by looking at this, it looks a little different than normal because Brian Buniak, he was a cartoonist in the 80s who did all kinds of random stuff. He did the gray tones on this. So it has a nice, polished look to it. Ken Bruzenak letters it as usual. Of course, just doing amazing logos and lettering, as he always does. And pretty much everything else is Gilbert, except, I don't want to ruin the surprise. We'll find out in a couple pages. But these little kids are visiting the Mr. Monster Museum. And they're all talking about, like, what's the best Mr. Monster story ever. This one kid has got his nose in a pulp magazine, which has this cover. So it's a little meta thing going on. And he's saying, you know, these old pulps that Mr. Monster were in, these are the best stories. And we see one of the paintings in the Dorman wing. So Michael Gilbert got Dave Dorman to paint a few paintings. It's kind of sad that they're in black and white here. It seems kind of a waste. But these do appear in full color in the miniseries Mr. Monster Attacks that was published by Tundra in the early 90s, in full color. I don't know if all of them did. I know this did. This was the cover, I believe, of #1. I think Michael Gilbert did the rough outline of this, and then Dave Dorman painted over it. Once again, such a waste, though. It's on black and white paper. Who cares? Sure, it looks nice, but... So the kids are telling stories and they're illustrating them. That's a great panel there. I love that. Mr. Monster in this awesome outer space get-up. Really fun cartooning here, the way he draws the kids. Here's another Dave Dorman painting. Him fighting this swamp creature. I don't think I've ever seen that in Mr. Monster, but maybe it's there. I don't know. I really like this. They're showing these classic sculptures, but Mr. Monster's replacing the main figure. So basically the kids in the pulp story, the main villain's Doc Sawbones. And the kid reading the pulp is just like, guys, this is the scariest villain that Mr. Monster's ever faced. That's why it's the best story. It's really good stuff. And we see this Iron Maiden discovered at the site of the Doc Sawbones massacre. And Doc Sawbones is in it. He's still alive. And he's got an axe. And he comes out and he's creeping towards the little boys. And then we see another pulpish cover. Doc Sawbones threatening some woman in lingerie. And when the kids turn around, Doc Sawbones has got his axe raised. And of course, they're like, ah! They're very scared. And then Mr. Monster comes out of nowhere and attacks Doc Sawbones. And he just rips him from bone to bone. Because I think Doc Sawbones has no flesh left. Mr. Monster dumped him in an acid bath. So he's just a skeleton, basically. And Mr. Monster just breaks him up and saves the day. Pretty goofy. It's almost just like a coming attraction for Mr. Monster's series. I think all of this stuff was reprinted in Mr. Monster Attacks, even the story, so. And it might have been in color. We have another chapter of Brick Top by Glenn Fabry. As you can see, he definitely doesn't skimp on the ink. And there's this Lucy. They spell it like Lucy instead of Lucy. She's the woman from that first episode, if you remember, the first chapter. And she's pretty much like this tough, cool lady. And she's going out to meet her friends. And they're going to go out to a party. So she hooks up with this guy first. He's an animal lover. And then they hook up with the guy from that last issue we saw, the kind of chubby guy with the weird hat. Meanwhile, we see this hobo drinking wine on the street. And this alien being appears before him. And then we cut back. We cut away. So these, our intrepid crew make it to the party. And Lucy knows that her ex-boyfriend is probably going to be there. So she's just getting drunk. And some guy's checking her out, actually. So like, and this other guy's like, dude, she's bad news. The guy she used to date, when he broke up with her, all he said was never again. And we cut back to the hobo. And basically, this alien says, I am Zinmoth of Thrad. I've chosen tonight to descend among you. But first, I need a servant to guide me. And then she zaps him with this mind blast. She says, behold now as I reduce you to your demonic essence, your new form shall be far more pleasing. And then it looks like nothing happened except he burps. And maybe his clothes are a little nicer. And back at the party, they're lighting off fireworks. Not much happens in these brick tops. It's very slice of life. I definitely get the sense, like many English artists around this time, that they read a few copies of Love and Rockets by the Hernandez brothers, especially Jaime's work, and were like, I'm doing that. There's so many comics like in Deadline and just around that time that are like, oh man, guys, you know Hernandez brothers. I forgot to mention at the last panel here, the boyfriend does come in, the ex-boyfriend, and we see Lucy get out of her chair, but we don't see what happens. Oh, I'm sorry. She throws a platter of hors d'oeuvres at his face. Next is Jeepster by Philip Bond. And this is a kind of a little slice of life story. This woman has got a boyfriend who stays up all night. I guess he doesn't have a job. He's probably on the dole. And he just blasts the TV. She rarely sleeps more than 2 hours a night. Her life is this merry-go-round of taking sleeping pills at night and then waking up and taking pep pills so she can make it to work in time. He just seems like a really shitty boyfriend. Just a tosser, if you will. A loser. I'm not going to try to use English slang. I'll probably be using it wrong. Once again, just like Jimmy Hewlett, Philip Bond, I love his cartooning. He draws women so cute. He makes all the women characters just like just gorgeous. And we see her heading to work. She gets her pep pills. She tries to make it through the day without falling asleep. And she makes it home. As soon as she walks through the door, her gad-about boyfriend all day hasn't been working. And as soon as she walks through the door, he says, make us some coffee, will you, love? So she makes the coffee, but she puts her sleeping pills in his coffee so she can get a good night's sleep for once. And he falls asleep in like 5 minutes. So she actually fucks with the TV set so it won't work ever again. And then she goes to sleep and has a great night's sleep for the first time in forever. But when she wakes up, she feels all confused. Something's missing. Then she realizes that it's quiet for once. There's no TV. And she realizes that her boyfriend's missing too. And when she walks in the bathroom, knocks on the door, and she steps in, Titus, her boyfriend, is it looks like he just slashed his wrists and he's sitting on the toilet dead. It's a very odd story. I don't really get it. She's very nonplussed about it too. She just says, well, I guess I ruined his morning. So I guess she was fed up with this guy more than we thought. Or she doesn't even mind that he's killed himself. The only thing I took from it is that this guy doesn't, I guess that was his self-medication. Staying up all night watching TV, and without it, he went crazy? I don't know. It's pretty dumb. He probably was reading too much Hernandez Brothers, trying to make a quirky little tale or something. Another ad. God, I just love Jamie Hewlett stuff. Here we have a short by Al Davison. Al Davison kind of made a splash in the 80s where he published this graphic novel called The Spiral Cage, which was autobiographical. He grew up with some kind of disease like spina bifida, the kind of disease where, like, when he's from being a little kid, he had to use crutches. He was basically crippled his whole life. But he taught himself martial arts, and, you know, he had a full life. He had a nice life. But, of course, he always had a struggle against this. And we see, it's kind of an interesting format here. We see him reminiscing about his childhood, him and his friends playing cowboys and Indians, drawn like this, you know, like a little kid. But then it's a current event where he's walking down the street and these Nazi skinheads start fucking with this black guy who's got like his little baby in his arms. They punch him in the face. And Al Davison, the character, is just like, ah, shit. I can't let this go. There's other scenes in Spiral Cage where he does like superheroic things, where he intervenes, because he is pretty good at martial arts, even though his legs don't work that good. He knows what he's doing. So in his memories of being a child playing cowboys and Indians, he was the Indian. And this is basically an excuse for all his friends to be the cowboys who would just beat the crap out of him. But just like when he was a little boy, we see him going up against the multiple skinheads, these Nazis, and he's beating them up. He's just using his martial arts, and they can't get a punch on him. And also the child version of Al Davison, same thing happens. He uses his crutch to fight back against these cowboy bullies, and he wins basically. So in the current situation, Al Davison's getting tired. He's fighting all these skinheads at once, and his legs don't work that well. But then the police sirens peal, and the skinheads run away, and Al Davison's just like, oh, God, thank God. And the black guy holding the baby is just in shock. He's just like, ah. And the last panel is little kid Al Davison's Indians won this time. And it says, yeah, but the trick is to keep winning without becoming a cowboy. I've thought of that a lot, especially everyone's talking about Israel now and the Palestinians. And it's like, yeah, you can fight, stand up for yourself. But some of those people stand up for themselves a little too hard, and then they become the bad guy. So, I shouldn't get into it. Sorry. Ignore what I just said. Here we have another Barry Windsor Smith comic. And this one's not very good. It's really well drawn, as you can see. But it's almost like one of those stories in Epic Illustrated or Heavy Metal. It's just some kind of head-scratching, kind of arty bullshit. This guy puts his hat in the air and it's hovering. This other guy puts his hat. And the other guy comes in and starts beating him up. It makes no sense. It's stupid. Of course, maybe I'm stupid. But I think in this instance, I'm a fucking genius and Barry Windsor Smith's stupid. I don't know about this. I really like the art, though. Very interesting. Especially for Barry Windsor Smith, who loves to noodle, you know. It's all pared down. Oh, this comic's kind of fun. It's called Kern. And this is written by this guy, Paul Bearer. Oh, God, I just realized. Saying it out loud. Paul Bearer. P-E-H-R-E-R. So that's a pseudonym, obviously. I don't know who wrote it. And art by Simon Bisley. And this is before Simon Bisley was like hot shit Simon Bisley. I mean, in England he was. He had already done Schlar and the Berserker, I think. But this is another one where, look, it looks fully painted, but it's like, it's in black and white. I think this was reprinted in Heavy Metal magazine years later. So there probably is a color version of this somewhere. So this guy Kern is a barbarian, very Conan-like, and we see him laying siege with his soldiers to this like very rich city, one of the most opulent cities in this, barbarian world. And he's just mowing through these guards and these soldiers. The siege engines are knocking down every wall they encounter. He's heading for the royal throne room, He's going to take out the king. We find out that Kern made a deal with basically like a warlock. And this warlock put these bolts in his neck, these gems, and they gave him basically invincibility and immortality. And then as soon as he was done, Kieran killed the guy. So ever since then, back then him and his band of guys would just like attack little outlying villages, but now they've gotten stronger and stronger with him leading them. And they're going for the big fish. And we see him getting closer to the throne room so he can kill the king. The king is shitting his pants. But the last defender, Augur, the imperial hero, Pulposa, King Pulposa's personal sword arm. And Kieran is just laughs to himself. He's like, oh, I like the big ones. They scream louder when you tear their bollocks off. I do like how the language in here is not like your typical barbarian comic. It's more colloquial, more modern. And, like saying things like bollocks. It's more crude. I get a little tired of reading barbarian comics where everyone's like almost talking that weird Shakespearean shit, like, not Shakespearean, but it's like saying oaths and stuff, and just nobody talks like that. So apparently Kieran met his match, and Augur wins their battle. And so we see Kieran, they put his head on a hook for everyone to see. And because he can't die, he's got to feel how his brain is rotting away and maggots are writhing in his face. He's got to feel all of the decomposition of his head, and eventually even those whatever they're called, the studs in his neck, the jeweled studs. Even there's nothing to hold them on anymore. They fall out, and eventually nothing remained, only the howling silence and azure fire burning in the pit of night. And that's the azure fire is those blue gems. I'm sorry, they don't fall off his neck. They're still hanging there at the end. I read that wrong. But look how good Simon Bisley is, man. Just, I really got to see this in color. I think I have that Heavy Metal. I think it's in that special issue War Machine. It was a very special issue of a Heavy Metal standalone. So I got to pull that off the shelf. This next one's called Obsessional. Story by Kevin McManus. And script by Steve Moore. Art by Sean McManus. Sean McManus did some of the classic Alan Moore Swamp Thing issues. Did tons of stuff for Independence, for Vertigo over the years. Pretty fun artist. Definitely coming from like the Bernie Wrightson school. Almost cartoony, but definitely very spooky. It looks like his brother gave him an idea for a story, but wasn't good enough to write it, so they gave it to longtime English writer Steve Moore. And this is very much like this could be a war and creepy comic. And so this guy's describing a recurring nightmare he has, where he's got like his eyes closed as if he'd been in a fight, and his legs are like totally in pain. How he's talking about basically how he has this fear of rats in the walls ever since he read this H.P. Lovecraft story. And he lives in this kind of crappy boarding house, so there's rats there. So it's just, he keeps having this nightmare. It's pretty good looking stuff. And in the nightmare, the rats attack him. First, they attack his legs. He can't move really because he's in so much pain. And then they get higher and higher and attack him. So he describes that. That's not the worst part of his recurring nightmare. The worst part is that he has the false awakening thing. You know, like an American Werewolf in London. And he thinks he's awake, but he knows he's not because his eye is still fucked up. And his legs hurt. And when he pulls the sheets off the covers, the rats are eating his leg. That's pretty horrific. And he wakes up at the same exact time every morning. He thinks it means something, but he's not sure. But then he says, last night I was in a drunken fight. Some guy kicked my leg and this blacked my eye. I didn't dare sleep at all last night. I stayed up all night listening to the rats in the walls. So it's almost like his nightmare is going to come true. Here we have a cute little story by Gary and Warren Police. They were like the Hernandez brothers. They were a brother artist team, writer, but one was a writer, one was an artist. Gary Police wrote, Warren Police drew. Warren Police went on to draw a bunch of Vertigo comics, a few other things. Always liked his style. Definitely unique. Just kind of gritty. I don't know how to describe it. Gritty might not be the word. But this one's a pretty goofy story. How about this guy who becomes, he's a train spotter at first. He's obsessed with that. But then he finds a comic book one day and becomes a fanatical comic book fan. Not much of a story. But I like looking at his art. This is weird. It's almost like an ad for the 14 Times, but it's listed in the contents page as if it's a, part of A1. It's an example of some 14 events. And the 14 Times is a British magazine that talks about like crazy, strange but true stories. Hunt Emerson draws for it all the time. So here's some Hunt Emerson drawings. I don't know if these are all repeats just from the magazine. And then it even has the information. So this is really a 2-page ad for the 14 Times. But I guess they figured, hey, we're getting some Hunt Emerson illustrations. And these are all fun. These crazy little stories, It's like those true facts from the National Lampoon, but even weirder. Oh, this sounds weird. Ted McKeever, The Talk of Creatures. And I love this pig. This whole page, just the lettering. That's a great piece there. So basically we see this guy and someone in the narrative caption box, someone is saying, don't go near the water. But this guy says, fuck that. He takes off his clothes. He jumps in the pond. And all of a sudden he comes up screaming like, I don't know, something's trying to get him or something. And he wakes up in bed. I guess he made it to the shore and was lying in the grass. And he says, Mom, can pigs really fly at dusk? Don't be silly, dear. They can fly no higher than you or I. And we look outside the window. There's a flying pig. He's probably looking for a big lineup so he can entertain people. And so basically it looks like this magic pig. He saved this guy. Not much of a story once again. Hey, look at me. I'm the flying pig. I don't know if you guys know that Kids in the Hall sketch, but it's fucking hilarious. Oh, what a lineup. So, and another great thing, always a great addition to an anthology. This is before they were all collected, so this was precious back then. Eddie Campbell contributes a Deadface story. Well, we know that him more as Bacchus now, but back then he was called Deadface, even though he was Bacchus. But the title was Deadface. Look at this fucking art here. Oh, man, I love Eddie Campbell. And here, once again, Bacchus is at a bar. regaling people with tales of the Greek gods. And this time he's talking about Hermes and how Hermes isn't this like guy who delivers flowers, like the FTD florist, you know, with the little wings on his feet. He's a right bastard. He basically was like Zeus's hitman. When he was flying around, he wasn't just delivering shit. He was like, Zeus was like, hey, go kill this guy. He pissed me off. So I guess Hermes is kind of in charge of delivering souls to hell. He makes a lot of money from it, a little side money. But I guess there was something, at some point, a lot of the dead came out of Hades, you know, hell. And so for like centuries, he's been hunting them down. He's almost like Ash from The Evil Dead. He's been hunting down these zombies and sending them back to Hades. So I guess the latest monster that he's on the lookout for is the Cyclops. That's why he's in the Greek islands. I love this abstract drawing of the Cyclops. This is Hermes now. It looks like he's pretty well off. He's basically like a big game hunter. Look at this here, though. Is that Mr. Monster's mask? Because he is a monster hunter. I think it is. A little shout out there. So I guess Hermes takes off to Crete because he's heard that there's rumors of the Cyclops living in the caves in the hills. So he finds this one cave and he sees like a beaming light. He's like, oh my God, is that the Cyclops? But it's really just a guy with one of those mining hats on with the flashlight on that thing. And he says, sorry, I was looking for someone else. But it turns out these guys are no good nicks. They're like, I think drug dealers or something. Oh, they're terrorists. And so the leader says, okay, guys, we can't allow this loose end. You know, follow him down there and head him off at the pass. We can't let that guy live. So they do just that. And of course, they don't know he's Hermes. And they don't know how they're about to enter a world of shit. How we just see Hermes just demolish these guys. It's pretty gory. And so the whole time, Bacchus has been telling the people in the bar how, like, oh yeah, my good friend Hermes is actually on his way. That's why he told the story. I haven't seen him in forever. And Bacchus says, hey, did you find your prey? Hermes is like, nah, I just found some small fry. I'm going to America tomorrow. I'm giving up. I don't think I'm going to find the Cyclops. And so they wish each other farewell. And I love this. The waiter comes out and says, is he gone? Can I come out? He's a Cyclops. And Bacchus basically was hiding this poor Cyclops the whole time. He knew he was there. I was reading this on the bus and I laughed out loud. That was a fun little ending there. So there you go, guys. Ooh, I knocked the phone. Sorry about that. A1 number 2, another fine issue. I can't wait to see what's going to be in number 3. So I hope you guys join me then. It'll probably be in like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days or so. So hope you enjoyed looking at this with me. And I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.